Mr. President, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
If I could just begin with getting your reaction to the remarks Mr. Ahmadinejad made yesterday, faulting America for 9/11.
Well, it was offensive, it was hateful, and particularly for him to make the statement here in Manhattan, just a little north of Ground Zero, where families lost their loved ones, people of all faiths, all ethnicities, who see this as the seminal tragedy of this generation. For him to make a statement like that was inexcusable. And it stands in contrast with the response of the Iranian people when 9/11 happened, when there were candlelight vigils, and I think a natural sense of shared humanity and sympathy was expressed within Iran. And it just shows once again sort of the difference between how the Iranian leadership and this regime operates and how I think the vast majority of the Iranian people, who are respectful and thoughtful, think about these issues.
In your first video message you sent in March of 2009 on the occasion of the Persian New Year, you spoke to the government of Iran and people of Iran, and you talked about how you are committed to diplomacy. And you also said that this process of talking about all the issues on the table will only succeed if there is no threats. And with threats, this will not go forward. Yet your administration, in much of this year, not only threatened Iran with sanctions, but finally enacted sanctions that have been branded as crippling. What do you say to those who see this as a departure from that promise of no threats and diplomacy only?
Oh, I think we have to be, we have to look at what we've done this year, and it's very consistent. What I've said consistently is that we are willing to reach out with an open hand to the Iranian government and the Iranian people. Because we believe that there's nothing inevitable that should cause Iran and the United States to be enemies. There's a history there that is difficult, but it can be bridged with mutual understanding, mutual respect, and we want to see the people of Iran ultimately succeed. But the government has taken Iran on a path that has led to international condemnation. I think it's very important to understand that the sanctions that arose this year had to do with the fact that alone among signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has not been able to convince the international community that its nuclear program is peaceful. That's not just my judgment, that's the judgment of the international community, including countries like Russia and China that generally are very hesitant to impose sanctions on other countries. But they have consistently seen a behavior on the part of the Iranian government that indicates that it has a nuclear program that does not abide by international rules and that potentially poses a threat to the region as well as the world. Now, that's a choice that the Iranian regime has made. They can make another choice, and we would welcome them making another choice, which would be to act responsibly. They would then be able to have their rights for a peaceful nuclear program under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that would remove the sanctions and would allow them to fully enter the international community in a way that would tremendously benefit the Iranian people. But we have not seen them make that choice yet. So this is not a matter of us choosing to impose punishment on the Iranians. This is a matter of the Iranians' government, I think, ultimately betraying the interests of its own people by isolating it further.
This government has lived through 3 decades of sanctions. Mm-hmm. What convinces you that this time it's any different, that it will end in some result for diplomacy or for resolution?
Well, there are no guarantees. This regime has shown itself to be very resistant to observing basic international norms and being willing to engage in serious negotiations around a nuclear program that has generated great fear and mistrust in the region and around the world. But we do think that the sanctions raise the costs for the government. Most of these sanctions are targeted at the regime, at its military, and we think that over time, hopefully, there's enough reflection within the Iranian government that they say to themselves, you know, this is not the best course for our people. This is not the best course for Iran, which is rooted in an incredible civilization. It has some of the highest literacy rates in the world. The potential for Iran to succeed economically, to open itself up to exchange and commerce with other countries is enormous. But in order to do that, the Iranian regime, I think, has to take a different course than the one that it's been on of late.
You speak of increasing cost, but many would argue that this is also impacting ordinary people in Iran. We get reports every day from a small businessman who can't import the spare part, mainly because of the banking system now not providing services to them, all the way to medicine and food prices going up because shipment lines are not being insured. All the way to old standing sanctions, like planes that are not sold to Iranians, that we have had 2,000 people die in plane crashes. All of these, are you not worried that this might backfire, that people of Iran would be looking at America and wondering why they're being punished in this process?
Well, look, I am obviously concerned about the Iranian people, and you know, they are trying to live their lives, and you know, there is so much promise in the country. The question is, can the Iranian regime take a different approach that would help its people as opposed to harm its people? Right now, it's not taking that approach. Right now, what the Iranian government has said is it's more important for us to defy the international community, engage in a covert nuclear weapons program, than it is to make sure that our people are prospering. And the international community, I don't think, prefers the choice that has been taken. As you noted, at the beginning of my term, I came in at some political cost, by the way, because obviously outrageous, disgusting statements of the sort that Mr. Ahmadinejad just made makes the American people understandably wary of any dealings with the Iranian government. But I said, you know, there should be a way for us to change the dynamic that has been in place since 1979, since you were born. And it turns out that so far, at least, the Iranian regime has been unwilling to change its orientation. So when people inside of Iran are asking themselves, why is it that we can't get spare parts, or food prices are going up, or you know, other basic necessities are harder to come by, they have to look at the management of their own government, both in terms of the economic management, but also in terms of them deciding that it's a higher priority to pursue a covert nuclear program than it is to make sure that their people have opportunity. I think they're moving down the wrong course, and they continue to have the option of moving down the right course.
If these sanctions fail, what are your options, Mr. President?
Well, I think there are a whole host of options, and these options would be exercised in consultation with the international community. Our strong preference is to resolve these issues diplomatically. I think that's in Iran's interest. I think that is in the interest of the international community, and I think it remains possible. But it is going to require a change in mindset inside the Iranian government. For
a lot of Iranians who are looking at the how this scenario is playing out, many see similarities to the run-up to the Iraq War. You know, the succession of UN resolutions, toughened economic sanctions, on and off talk about war and a military strike. What do you say to them that are worried that they'll wake up to a military attack by America or Israel?
Well, I think what people should remember is that I don't take war lightly. I was opposed to the war in Iraq. I am somebody who is interested in resolving issues diplomatically. I think that we have been very clear that the Iranian government has, and the nation of the Islamic Republic of Iran have a right to peaceful nuclear programs and peaceful nuclear power. That is a right that all NPT members have. So the Iranian government itself has said, we are not interested in nuclear weapons. That's their public statement. If that's the case, there should be a mechanism whereby they can assure and prove to the international community, including the IAEA, that that is in fact the case. And if they take those constructive steps in serious negotiations, then not only should there not be a threat of war, but there also won't be the sanctions that are currently in place. Again, the United States here is not operating unilaterally. There may have been strong objections to the United States going into Iraq. This is a situation where we've got the UN Security Council and countries that have significant business dealings with Iran making decisions not to do business with Iran, despite the fact that Iran is a significant oil producer. You know, when a country like Japan or South Korea or China or Russia, all of whom have commercial dealings with Iran, make these decisions, they do so at great cost to themselves. And the reason they're doing it is not simply because we're pressuring them. The reason they're doing it is because they too see a threat of destabilization if you have an Iranian regime pursuing nuclear weapons and potentially triggering an arms race in the region that could be dangerous for everybody.
What if during this process of diplomacy, Israel decides to attack Iran? Will you stop them?
Well, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals. I think that understandably, Israel is very concerned when the president of a country, a large country, near them, states that they should be wiped off the face of the earth. And so, you know, again, this is an example of where the Iranian people, I believe, are ill-served. To have a president who makes outrageous, offensive statements like this does not serve the interests of the Iranian people, does not strengthen Iran's stature in the world community. And there is an easy solution to this, which is to have a Iranian government act responsibly in the international community along the lines of not just basic codes of conduct or diplomatic norms, but just basic humanity and common decency. Again, for Ahmadinejad to come to somebody else's country and then to suggest somehow that the worst tragedy that's been experienced here, an attack that killed 3,000 people, was somehow the responsibility of the government of that country, is something that defies not just common sense, but basic senses of decency that aren't unique to any particular country. They're common to the entire world. Mr.
President, if I may, I want to move on to the human rights issue. After the disputed presidential election, we saw the birth of a green movement in Iran, brutally oppressed by the government. Right. We've all seen the images of young men and women dying on the streets, being shot at, many being taken into custody and dying in custody. Right. Journalists, politicians, students being taken to jail and staying there for years. Right. For a lot of these human rights activists, when they look at the United States, even though they've heard you talk about arc of justice and you talked about NEDA, right, they see that this sense of obsession